Arabella defies any easy definition. Ever since I played Baldur's Gate 3, I've wondered about her, but even after doing a lot of research, it's still been really difficult to figure out which category her magic fits into. And yet, it also hasn't. Pinpointing what Arabella actually is like trying to grasp water. You can cup it gently in your hands, but try to hold it tightly and it will just trickle away. Arabella ticks all of the boxes of the chosen one fantasy trope. Tragic childhood, greatness thrust upon them, special attention from higher powers, everything points to Arabella being a significant part of future tales from the Forgotten Realms. She may have been set up to be significant in Baldur's Gate 4, but now Larian isn't making that game, so who knows? The latter part of this video is going to be my speculation about what Arabella is because, honestly, she is nothing for sure except a mystery, so it's almost impossible to find any clear answers about her. I'll signpost where my theories start. To get to that point, you need to know how this tiefling child became able to wield shadows. Allow me to tell you Arabella's story. Arabella, along with her mother Chimera and her father Locke, hails from Elturel. Born in the city just down the Risen Road from Moonhaven and Wraithwyn, she ran wild in its streets with her friends, and from one of them she learnt a few pickpocketing tricks. That friend is Mol, who has her own destiny which I will be exploring at a later date. Arabella's fondness for pinching property that wasn't hers led to a slightly fraught relationship with her mum, and the pair fought quite a bit. Nevertheless, she was adored by her parents, who affectionately came up with their own nickname for her, Bells. Arabella is scrappy, smart, and impulsive. Her mother knows how inventive her daughter can be, to the extent that if the grove is threatened by goblins, she predicts that Arabella has already fashioned a weapon out of a rock and some string. In Elturel, Arabella would be one of the many victims of the Descent. I'm going to explain why and how Elturel got dragged down into Avernus, which is a key plot point of the Descent into Avernus campaign. There, obviously, will be spoilers here, so I'll include a timestamp right now to tell you where to skip to if you don't want any spoilers for the campaign. I'll give you a moment. Elturel was in the midst of being plagued by the undead. Its ruler, the High Rider, had built a wide network of vampires, undead, and sycophantic cultists in his city streets, and was using his bloodthirsty loyalists to slaughter Elturel's citizens. Nights were drenched in blood, any victories gained during the day swiftly clawed back once darkness fell. It was a massacre. In the middle of the most dire night, where the end seemed certain, a huge sphere appeared in the sky above Elturel. It shone with a radiant power, butchering any undead in the streets, and shining with a light so bright that it turned night into day. Thavius Krieg, a priest of Torm, took credit for this saviour, which was called the Companion. After the undead were vanquished, the Hellrider usurped, and his vassals quashed by Hellriders, Elturel's vanguard, the Companion remained. It hung above the city, silent and shining, a holy miracle. Thavius ascended to become High Overseer of the city. His one competitor for the title mysteriously disappeared, but I'm sure there's nothing to read into there. For 50 years, the Companion remained in the sky, bringing holy pilgrims to the city who sought its divine blessing. Little did they know that it wasn't an entirely divine light that they were bathing in, but prostrating beneath their saviour, which had, in fact, been created by Zariel, Archduchess of Avernus. In exchange for saving Elturel, Thavius had signed away the souls of everyone in the city to his mistress, who he had begun to worship long before the Companion appeared in the sky. Unbeknownst to Elturians like Arabella, Chimera, and Locke, the clock was ticking. Once 50 years had passed, the Companion turned into an abyssal sphere of darkness and dragged Elturel down into Avernus. Thavius Krieg was, by no coincidence, away from the city at this time. Older Ravengard was on a diplomatic mission to Elturel, which is mentioned in Baldur's Gate 3, and so he, along with everybody else within the city walls, found themselves in the 9 Hells. Zariel planned to use these innocent souls to bolster her front lines in the blood war against demons. Eventually, Elturel was freed from Avernus and was restored to the material plane. All of that happened before the events of Baldur's Gate 3. The entire saga is called The Descent, and Arabella and her parents would have suffered through it. Nowhere in the streets of Elturel was safe at this time, as devils stalked through the streets looking for souls to steal. Arabella and her parents would likely have cowered in cellars or basements during this time, praying that their hiding spot remained undiscovered. All was not well when Elturel returned to the material plane. You would expect that there would be jubilation and celebration that the citizens had been saved from the 9 Hells, but people always find a way to ruin things. A new, fetid wave of prejudice was born, directed against tieflings. Cruel, ignorant, and scared Elturians all had turned against their horned neighbours under the racist conspiracy theory that tieflings somehow had something to do with Elturel's sojourn in Avernus. As tieflings have ancient demonic heritage, they were easy targets for someone looking for innocents to blame. Consequently, communities of tieflings began to flee Elturel. Their home had been turned against them. This is where the refugees in the Emerald Grove hail from, and is why a disproportionate amount of refugees in Baldur's Gate 3 are tieflings. I would also like to point out here that the real person to blame for the descent into Avernus is a white male priest. So if anyone ever tries to tell you that fantasy isn't political, kick them in the throat. For legal reasons, that is a joke. No child should have to go through these kinds of events. Arabella had now been through the Hells and survived, the first domino falling in being a chosen one. Arabella did not like the Emerald Grove. She preferred the city streets of her home of Elturel and felt unsettled in the boundless nature of the Risen Road. Anyone who's a city kid can probably relate to this, that your first trip out to the countryside can be a little bit overwhelming if you're used to streets. In the Emerald Grove, she played with other kids, Moll among them. The tieflings had a paltry amount of gold between them as they had fled with haste, which was worrying Moll. Without gold, how were they going to survive in Baldur's Gate? Moll convinced Arabella to steal the idol of Sylvanus from the sacred pool under the misguided belief that 1. The Druids won't notice that their prized idol had gone missing, and 2. That they would be able to conceal it and then sell it for gold in Baldur's Gate, and then live off that gold. This is truly a child's logic. But I can't fault Moll's creative, if ill-advised, problem solving. In the middle of the Rite of Thorns, Arabella snuck up onto the plinth and touched the idol of Sylvanus, but was caught mid-theft and hauled down into the Druid temple. The idol of Sylvanus was spontaneously formed from wood and resin from an oak tree that was touched by the Tree Father himself. More about that in my theory section. Tav saves Arabella from being accidentally killed by Tila, Cagha's familiar, and reunites her with Locke and Komora, who are furious at their daughter, but glad beyond belief that she is safe. Following the Emerald Grove being saved from the goblin threat, the tieflings continued their journey along the Risen Road to Baldur's Gate. Their path took them through the shadow-cursed lands. Here, their leader, Zevlor, was manipulated by the Absolute to alert its cultists to their presence, and the tieflings scattered. Locke and Komora fled with Arabella but lost sight of their daughter and ran towards the House of Healing, under the tragically misguided belief that a place of healing would be safe. It was the opposite, and instead of being greeted by healers who could tend to their wounds or offer shelter, Locke and Komora were killed by nightmare nurses. Their bodies would be laid out in the House of Healing's children's ward. There, Sister Lidwin would care for her patients and provide them a tender touch in death. Arabella was alone. She found herself in the ruined town of Wraithwyn, and from the darkness emerged winnowy shadows. Dark claws reaching out from the shadow curse awoke Arabella's sleeping power. She instinctually wrought vines out of the same shadow the threat was born from, restrained the shadows, and ran deeper into the town. There she met Tav once more. Tav agreed to look for her parents if Arabella sought refuge at their camp, and so the young girl retreated to the safety of Tav's circle of tents. Here she befriended Withers, or as she calls him, Bone Man. The stoic figure couldn't have been more different from Arabella's innocent youth. While Tav was absent from the camp, Withers tutored Arabella in the principle of balance and begun to sense that she was more powerful than anyone in the camp realised. Tav returned to break the news of Chimera and Locke's death. Arabella lashed out in her grief. Withers calmed the storm of magic swirling around her by showing Arabella glimpses of her future and reminding her of the balance of life and death. In thanks for finding her parents and granting her closure, Arabella teaches Tav her Shadow Vines spell. Withers gently told Arabella to follow the weave, and although Arabella was still mourning her parents, whatever she had seen through Withers' magic renewed her inner strength. The weave guided Arabella towards Baldur's Gate. Yet again she would run into Tav, as she had a feeling she might. Deep in the sewers, Arabella can be found examining a stone, surrounded by dead bandits who made the mistake of trying to attack the young prodigy. Arabella lends Tav her help in battle. Finally, she's found by Elminster, guided by the weave also, and in the epilogue reveals that she's being taught by him how to harness her magic. Arabella's story ends there, but it's not over. Inside all of the dialogue orbiting Arabella is valuable information which I've used to draw some conclusions about her magic. All of this makes you feel like I'm putting Arabella in a petri dish and teaching her like a specimen, but getting this forensic with it is my lore ethos, so forgive how clinical some of this might sound. Wild magic sorcerers can sense that Arabella's magic is even wilder than theirs. Druids feel that that same magic is similar to Druidcraft, which wields the forces of nature. Arabella herself reveals that the Idol of Sylvanus is what changed her and that she can do all sorts of stuff now, not just the vines. She channels her magic by thinking hard and then saying some loud words, but these loud words can be something as simple as twist them up, which is how she wrangles her shadow vines in Wraithwin. The Dungeon Master gives an impartial view of Arabella's magic, which is one of the most significant descriptions which I will be returning to later. The Dungeon Master says, "Your very soul is tangled in shadow. Arabella's magic, wild as cursed briar." A long exchange with Withers gives more detail about Arabella's power from the perspective of a god. Withers says that the weave would not like to see one like her abandoned, that Arabella holds a power beyond reckoning, that of the decaying forest and the seedling that bore it. When Arabella hears of her parents' death, the context for the voice actors of this scene is as follows. Arabella's anger grows and black flames surround her as she yells, a magical manifestation of her hurt and rage. Withers consoles the child. He urges her to listen to the balance, calmly asking her if she hears where creation meets ruin, where morning meets midnight, the root of all being. Context explains that he says this as Arabella's magic rages. Tav can also feel Arabella's grief fade as if it was their own, with some lightness within her soothing her power. Arabella is looking into Withers' magic and getting a glimpse of the future. She asks if that is her future and if that's why her parents died. Withers replies with one answer to both questions. It is. Deep in the sewers of Baldur's Gate, Arabella says that she had a feeling Tav would show up as if it was fate. She is studying a stone and its thoughts. Baldur's Gate 3 specifically says that Arabella's inner voice is quieted by thoughts from the far past. The thoughts of the stone, which you wouldn't really expect a stone to have. This stone holds the memories of all who have passed by it. The histories flow from Arabella into you. Creatures slain, lovers reunited, spells crackling through the air. The girl is collecting every last vision. It's as natural as breathing for her. The last key quote that I want to highlight is from Arabella's exchange with Tab after they find her in the sewers. Arabella says, "Bone Man told me to follow the weave, to let it guide me. I've learned a lot thanks to him, and I'm still learning. And I've only scratched the surface. I want to know everything. Bone Man was right. The weave will take care of me. I just need to listen." Arabella is having direct contact from the weave. Pulling at her instinct rather than the clear finger of Mistra pointing in the right direction, the weave is reaching out to Arabella regardless of whether Mistra wants it to or not, as long as Arabella listens. Reading Arabella's epilogue letter does shed some light on her destiny. Elminster, guided by the Weave, has sought out Arabella and is now tutoring her in how to make sense of the leaves in what she calls her head tree. The two followed the Weave to find each other, so Arabella still tapped into the Weave in a fundamental way. I know that was a lot of information, but try to just hold those quotes and facts and dialogue in your mind for now. They'll be very important in the theory section, and I hope are building up a picture in your mind about Arabella's powers. But I can get more specific. Almost all of Arabella's powers are connected to shadows. She has the Shadow Entangle, which uses the shadowy vines we meet in Act 2. Then there's also the Shadow Blade, which creates a sword that has harnessed shadow creatures somehow. Its description reads, "Umbral claws sweep through the long, slender facets of the blade." This weapon is granted to Tav via the Shadow Blade ring, which Arabella gives to them after delivering news of her parents' death. While you can hand-wave this away as just being a quest reward, the more interesting question is how Arabella came about this ring. Could she have been called to find it, as it wields shadow magic? Or did Larian just think that a player might be a bit miffed if Arabella gave them a reasonable quest reward, considering she's a child, namely a scrawled drawing? Which would have been adorable, honestly. Arabella's main spell is her Shadow Entangle, which she can teach to Tav. This is a spell that she uses to restrain the shadows in Wraithwin. Reading into the condition Shadow Entangle grants, you can find something very interesting. Unlike the base Entangle spell, Shadow Entangle doesn't manifest cursed physical vines from the earth. In the base spell, Entangle calls upon roots from below the earth to hinder anyone walking over them. Shadow Entangle instead gives the condition Weave-bound vines, the description of which reads, "Vines crafted from the very weave itself, a most unorthodox enchantment." These are not magical vines. These are vines made of magic. Yet again, I'm going to go into this in more detail in the theory section because I am sticking with facts right now, but make no mistake, these vines are made out of the Weave, the magic system which pervades the Forgotten Realms. One of the boons for getting on Arabella's good side is not only that she'll teach you Shadow Entangle, but she'll also help out in the final fight. Arabella will lend Tav the Weave Walker condition, the description of which reads, "One must remove all obstacles to follow one's destiny." Arabella's favour grants affected creatures the benefits of freedom of movement. Tav only experiences this condition because of Arabella's favour, so it's not a permanent ability. Favour makes it sound a bit like a god bestowing a blessing, doesn't it? As I'm on the broad topic of Arabella and her propensity for shadow magic, there's some beautiful light and darkness theming going on around Arabella and her life. Saving Arabella from Kaga and Tila unsurprisingly overjoys Chimera and Locke. In thanks, Chimera gives Tav her locket, which grants the Dancing Light cantrip. On its back is an inscription. This inscription reads, "Never dark again." Dancing lights appear when the spell is cast, just to be absolutely clear about that. Perhaps this was a locket that Chimera received from Locke after the descent, where they presumably had to hide in the dark for long periods of time. Arabella's mother may have developed a fear of the dark, a PTSD surrounding being in a dark, enclosed space, because it reminds her of this horrendous time in her life. Doesn't it seem poetic, maybe tragic, that the type of magic associated with Chimera is that which wields light? Yet Arabella's magic is saturated in shadow. Her past through Chimera being represented through light and her future being represented by shadow is a thematic inversion in my eyes. As Arabella moves into her future and understands herself more, typically an arc associated with seeing the light, she instead masters the wielding of shadows. Her past, imbued with so much fear and pain and turmoil from the descent into Avernus and the Emerald Grove, is encapsulated, to Tav at least, by the Dancing Light cantrip, a spell that feels hopeful to me, a light to them in dark places when all other lights go out. Okay, now it's time to tell you what I think. I am halfway through telling you all about Arabella and what her magic might be, so if you are liking the video, please feel free to give it a like and subscribe to my channel. I cover Baldur's Gate 3 lore, but in the future I'm also thinking of covering Elden Ring and the Fable reboot that's coming out next year. And if you want to go further and support me even more, number one, thank you so much. You can go to my Patreon where there are different tiers and different levels of support will get you different rewards like early ad-free videos or exclusive monthly videos. And you can also become a YouTube member, which is a lore archivist, and you get a cool little hat beside your name. I wish I could add these in Patreon, but apparently I can't. But anyway, back to telling you what I think about Arabella. Let me just get this disclaimer out of the way. None of this is canon, this is all pure theory, but I will back it up with evidence, don't you worry. So, the main consensus that I've read online is that Arabella's magic is Druid magic, but shadow-themed. There is a theory that Arabella touching the idol gave her druidic powers, or that she may be a chosen of Sylvanus. After doing some reading of various source books, I don't really agree with either of these theories. One theory I had is that Arabella's magic was a manifestation of shadow druid magic. I thought maybe as she touched the idol of Sylvanus in the middle of the Rite of Thorns, she may have been an accidental conduit for the shadow druids. Touching the idol could have led Arabella to absorb the Rite of Thorns in a way, hence being able to wield a dark version of druidcraft. Or the magic being channeled through the idol was corrupted because of the hate the shadow druids infused with it, which is why Arabella's magic is shadow-themed. Or she may have had power over the shadow curse, the idea for which is mainly based on her shadow entangle. That would be halfway between the shadow weave and druidcraft, as the shadow curse is a manifestation of the Shadowfell where the shadow weave emerges from. However, there is no sign for the shadow curse being close enough to the Emerald Grove for this to take place, which, in these theories, is the locus for Arabella's magic beginning. If her magic was awoken by touching a nature god's relic, and she wields vines and describes her magic as being like a tree, the logical deduction from that is that Arabella's magic is linked to druids. Druid Tav can even say that Arabella's magic resembles theirs. So, more evidence apparently supporting the shadow druidcraft theory. But shadow druids do not have their own distinct magic. They are ideologically shadow druids. They invoke the same nature god as normal druids and just use their magic differently. Shadow is just a word for them to describe their underhand, evil-aligned nature. It doesn't literally mean that they wield the shadow weave. Instead of Arabella's magic being druid-aligned, I think touching the idol of Sylvanus spontaneously made her a conduit for the weave itself. Arabella shows multiple signs of being an inheritor of the weave, and her power goes far beyond being a normal-born sorcerer. Withers says that the weave would not see their own abandoned, and her vines are said to specifically be made of the weave itself. In a normal entangle spell, the vines and roots it consists of are physically present in the earth and the spellcaster calls upon them to act according to their will. But Arabella's are the weave manifested. This is an unorthodox enchantment according to Baldur's Gate 3, which is putting it mildly. I reckon that Arabella's magic has been influenced by seeing the druids at work and travelling through the shadow-cursed lands, where vines and roots abound above ground. In my eyes, this is why Arabella's magic takes the form of vines. Kind of like if you want to start drawing, you might draw what's ever in front of you, but that doesn't mean that's the only thing you can draw. In fact, later on when we meet Arabella in the sewers of Baldur's Gate, I think she's already taken the next step to wield magic however she wants. Arabella is seen to be drinking in the knowledge that a single stone has absorbed over its time, and its entire existence, probably. Arabella is seen to be drinking in all of the knowledge a single stone has absorbed over its time, which is probably almost the entire existence of the world, realistically. I searched far and deep and wide and high and low to try and find a spell that allowed the caster to absorb the knowledge of the past from an item. The closest I got is a spell from the knowledge domain that is an eye-watering 17th level incantation. Visions of the past requires an object and a focus, and then the caster has to spend 1 minute in meditation and prayer. Following that, they will receive visions about the object's past. But these visions are vague, dreamlike, shadowy glimpses of only recent events. The stone is Arabella's focus. The knowledge is limited to that of the object's previous owner, not its entire lifetime. You also need to be holding the object. Arabella is not holding the stone when she's seeing its past. And she's reading what looks like years, if not decades of events. The game calls them histories and specifies the stone holds records of all who have passed by it. Creatures slain, lovers reunited, spells crackling through the air. The girl is collecting every last vision. It's as natural as breathing for her. This is way beyond the purview of a single Visions of the Past spell, which means Arabella is casting spells way above 17th level, which means that Arabella is something beyond definition, so allow me to try at the very least to narrow it down. In Dungeons & Dragons, characters that are levels 17 to 20 and above are called Masters of the World. That's according to David Barker, a moderator for D&D Beyond, and so someone who's verified by Dungeons & Dragons, essentially. Masters of the World are almost demigods. They are beyond mortal measure, can invoke the power of the gods, and the deeds they do will be sung of by bards for centuries and go down in the annals of history. Arabella is, if not a demigod already, certainly a demigod, at least, in the making. Returning to the Weave Walker condition, the name for the spell alone suggests that it's the weave itself that Arabella can traverse, and she's lending Tav that ability. As a Weave Walker, she was probably free to avoid a host of threats to get to the sewers in Act 3, considering that the condition grants freedom of movement, so any kind of obstacle in her path wouldn't have had any effect on the child. The spells Arabella wields are instinctual. Their names are new and spring from her own understanding of the weave, as it hasn't been explained to her or formally taught via any school of magic. Elminster seeks her out after the finale of Baldur's Gate 3 because the weave has commanded him to find her. And remember, Elminster is the most powerful wizard in the Forgotten Realms at the point of Baldur's Gate 3, as far as we know. Mystra, or the weave, is evidently taking a personal interest in Arabella. If you ask me, and if you're watching this video, I hope it's because you're interested in my opinion, Arabella is the chosen of a certain deity, perhaps of Mystra. After the disaster of Gale's ascension to power and him trying to reincorporate a fragment of the Netherese weave to the weave entire, Mystra may be scrambling to bestow her favour to someone who won't disappoint her. Now, look, I don't like Mystra. She manipulated Gale, and I think something that rhymes with bloomed him. Mind you, Arabella may be something even more powerful than a chosen of a certain deity. Withers says that Arabella holds a power beyond reckoning, which he describes as that of the decaying forest and the seedling that bore it. My interpretation of that enigmatic phrase is that Arabella wields the power of time, life, death, and creation. Mystra is goddess of the weave, yes, but honestly, it sounds like Arabella could be a chosen of someone even more powerful with a description like that. Perhaps Lord Ao. Something that challenges this chosen theory is that Arabella does show signs of being a Shadowcaster. Shadowcasters wield the Shadow Weave and don't really learn it in the same way that those who channel the weave do. The more they channel the Shadow Weave and learn how to master it, the more their living body starts to become affected by the Shadow Weave. With increased study, they may cease blinking, appear not to breathe while sleeping, or become much harder to kill. Another sign of a Shadowcaster is that they don't require rest or nourishment nearly as often as an ordinary person. They cease to have the most basic of biological needs, and their powers become so great that they can cast many spells as innate magical abilities according to the Tome of Magic. Shadowcasters can also summon black fire, which Arabella does in her cutscene where she's reckoning with the death of her parents. When Tav learns Shadow Entangle, the Dungeon Master says that their soul is tangled in shadow. Two big checkpoints in the pro-Shadowcaster column for Arabella. Instead of casting spells, Shadowcasters invoke mystical secrets called mysteries. Split into Apprentice, Initiate, and Master, within these mysteries there are different levels which you have to invoke in order to cast these mysteries. So for one mystery of an Apprentice rank, there will be 3 different versions of it you can cast, and they are each at increasing difficulty. An explanation for Arabella being able to wield these mysteries with such ease as a child may point to her being destined to inherit the Shadow Weave from Shar, who used Mistra's death way back when to try and usurp her as the goddess of magic, but only succeeded in creating her own shadow version of the weave in her attempt. However, the fact that Shadowcasters do have defined limits to their powers via these mysteries seems to counter Arabella being one. I keep coming back to Withers saying that Arabella's power is something beyond reckoning, and as Shadowcaster's magic is literally reckoned with in the Tome of Magic, she still doesn't really fit that criteria to me. Remember, all of this is my speculation, and I would love to hear your theories about what Arabella is in the comments, because I am absolutely not claiming that I have the canon answer. Then there's Arabella's epilogue letter. She describes her knowledge and use of the weave as big black leaves on a tree, and it's something that I'm quite torn about. Either this is the same logic as her invoking shadow vines, and it's just how she's chosen to manifest her powers, rather than the vines being essential to her spell. They could just as easily be ropes, ribbons, or snakes. Or this is a direct link between nature and Arabella's abilities. I err on the side of it being more of a metaphor than any direct evidence of Sylvanus having a hand in Arabella's abilities. I don't really think this is to be taken as a literal representation of the weave for Arabella, more like a reflection of Arabella's formative time in the Grove. In her epilogue letter, Arabella also quotes Withers. He says that her balance is in transitional moments, where morning meets midnight, where creation meets ruin, the root of all being. Narrowing down what these phrases are referring to, I believe that the exact concept that Withers is getting at is that of creation, particularly creation which emerges from destruction. Again, for me, this loops back to Lord Ao. Arabella has a fair amount of cut content. Firstly, she was actually meant to go to Sorcerer's Sundries at the end of Act 2, presumably to be tutored by Lorroakan in place of Roland, and thank God that didn't happen because Arabella would have squished Lorroakan like a bug, but mind you, that's exactly what he deserves. Arabella would also have sought to resurrect her parents, which you can see via this flag here, and Withers would have taught Arabella something about her magic in the camp in Act 2. Now, Withers counsels Arabella in Act 2 in the camp, but he doesn't go far as to teach her, as he says that the weave is meant to guide her, not him. Tav would have met Arabella in the Undercity, perhaps as well as the sewers, or perhaps instead of the sewers, and don't you fret, an Undercity video is coming. Lastly, the most intriguing of the bunch is that there would have been a shadow version of Arabella who would have eventually been killed. While this may be another tick in the Shadowcaster column, there is also the possibility of the shadow version of Arabella being manifested by the Shadow Curse, much in the same way that Harpers and Flaming Fists can be corrupted by the curse itself. A failed attempt to corrupt her with a Shadow Curse may have instead resulted in a shadow version of her being born instead. As Arabella is encountered in Wraithwin with no moon lantern, it does raise the question of how she survived the Shadow Curse without any means of protection, where we've otherwise seen how quickly Harpers can fall to it. This shadow version would probably have provided the answer and proved just how powerful Arabella was way earlier in the game. I am genuinely really sorry that I don't have a clear explanation for you about where Arabella's powers come from. I wish I could settle on one clear explanation or theory, but then I would be ignoring a whole host of evidence that proves otherwise. And there is so much contradictory evidence no matter what theory I go with. I despise unclear answers, so I assure you this absolutely kills me. If I had to put my money on one, I would put it on Arabella being a chosen of Lord Ao and being set up to be the inheritor of Lord Ao's pantheon of powers. Lord Ao doesn't really participate in like the wider running of the Forgotten Realms as a whole. He's more a power that stays out of the way and just watches, apart from when he really needs to intervene. And like Withers, I'd imagine that he may be getting bored of it, so it might make sense for him to turn over his powers to a mortal so he can go and have a holiday. Maybe this would be permanent, maybe it wouldn't, but either way it would result in Arabella ascending to become his protege, essentially. Regardless of what she is, I really hope we see more of Arabella in the Forgotten Realms. From powerless to powerful, Arabella's reversal as a tiefling who survived the 9 hells, to then be persecuted, to then suffer a great loss in order to be the inheritor of the Weave, is quite the character arc. Perhaps if Larian was making Baldur's Gate 4, we would have seen more of Arabella. But for now, it's best to keep an eye on Elminster and see what he's getting up to. Like the Weave, he will hopefully lead us to Arabella's destiny. So that's what I think about Arabella's powers, and once again I'm sorry for that deeply unsatisfying conclusion, but now you know what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I really am interested in all range of theories here, because the fun thing when there's no clear answer is that means that everyone can have a go at trying to decide what their headcanon is. If you enjoyed this video, please do like it and subscribe to my channel, and as always you can also support me by becoming a lore archivist on YouTube or by going over to my Patreon. I am now going to go and probably film my next video, which is going to be on Ramazith, which a lot of you have been asking for, because I'm trying to do a bulk filming day, so forgive me because I know a lot of you look forward to the new makeup looks, but I cannot take this entire face of makeup off and then do another one, because that would literally take hours, and also I used some really bad setting power the first time I did my makeup and had to already take an entire face of makeup off again and then do this, but anyway, I will see all of you folks next time.